Hi guys. So I'm going to wait just a minute, see if anybody else joins us. Um, I know 2 days in a row. Check me out. I haven't done this for ages. I haven't been on 2 days in a row. I think since COVID, when I used to come on every day. But there was such a good response, overwhelming response yesterday to my video about lemon bottle, and sort of, I think it was the ethical aspect of it that got people contacting me, and I've had loads of comments both on and off the thread, and I thought it was worth dropping in to catch up with you again and kind of consolidate a bit of what I talked about yesterday, and to kind of push it on to the next sort of subject, and how sort of talking a little bit more about how I work and why I work like I do. um, there is a lot of aesthetics locally, a huge amount. So there's loads to choose from. As with anything, there's a great mix of the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's quite a few medical practitioners, which is great to see. And equally, there are some non-medics. Now, I know over time, when they're experienced enough, there are some non-medics who have a lot of experience in aesthetics. I think anybody who knows me knows my feelings on who should be doing aesthetics, and I think regulation is coming. And I think it's going to be a lot harder for non-medics to train. Now, that being said, if people have had decent training, they're very experienced, there should be things put in place so they can carry on practicing. But I think that the future legislation that will eventually come in, I mean, we're talking years rather than months, I think will push towards it being a medical only type of environment. And I do believe that that's right. We are the only country that I'm aware of, certainly in sort of the Western world, who allows anybody to do aesthetics. And I think it leads to undermining of the quality, of the seriousness of it. And in some countries you have to be a doctor, you can't even do it as a nurse. And I do believe there is a country where you have to be a plastic surgeon. I actually think that's excessive. I don't think it needs to be at that level, but I think medical background, it should be fundamental, and it is in most countries, and it will eventually be here too. That's not actually what I was here to talk to you about, but it is kind of linked, because my medical background is very, very important to me. My ethical practice is equally important to me. I pride myself in practicing ethically, and would only, do treatments that I felt were appropriate and that I was capable of doing. I have other people to send people to when we talk about, if there's things I don't do, or if somebody was a more complex case and I felt that, I needed somebody with more experience, I would send them to them, and things like that. So, like I said, the ethics and sort of morals of what I do are very, very important to me. So, as you've sort of seen from my comment, and I can't actually remember exactly what I wrote now, but basically following on from yesterday and the comments that I've had, one of the things I wanted to move on to is, that's right, we were talking about making sure people know exactly what it is they're having. I had more than one person contact me and say, you expect that the person you're going to for treatment knows all the stuff, and that you need to trust them. And you do. You need to be able to trust that person in front of you. You also need to have done your background and ask the right questions. And if you don't know the right questions, then come someone like me who can help you get all the information that you need. If you go somewhere and you don't get information, then I would strongly suggest you don't have treatments with them. Or if you don't get satisfactory answers to your questions, then again, find someone who can answer those questions for you. So, I've had people say they've had treatments and not really known exactly what it is they're having. And I realised that was the case, and I wrote a blog on it about 3 years ago now, which I have kind of revamped and rewritten and put back out there recently. And that is, what is the difference between Botox and fillers? It was sort of shortly after lockdown. We took the kids and the dogs, and we went off somewhere. I think it was just the one dog then. I think we only had the one. Went off somewhere. So I think sort of Ashbourne direction. Sat in this lovely little coffee shop, and can't help but we were in a very small room. There was only 2 tables in this room. Couldn't help but overhear the conversation. And I don't know what they were talking about generally, but I heard a couple of comments along the lines of, oh yeah, she had way too much Botox in her lips. And it just made me think, if you don't know, you don't know. I'm not criticizing the person. I'm not not sort of putting them up for humiliation or anything like that. Because if you don't know, you don't know. Just like, I might have heard of the names of some car parts, but I couldn't necessarily tell you what they do and what they're for. So, because I'm not a mechanic. And so there's no reason necessarily that these people would have known that. But I think we assume that people do. And when they come to us, they ask for a thing. I quite often have people come to me and ask for fillers and do this. Very, very few people would fill this part of the forehead. Occasionally it happens. But actually what you're asking for when you go, I don't like these, I need mine doing, it's Botox, not filler. And it made me realise that particularly the media as well, promote certain things and shout about certain words, and people know the word Botox and they know it's something to do with the face and with making people look perhaps, not as good as they should, and, looking a bit artificial. And then they know that lips are plumped up and made too big, but the word that sticks in the head, because it's an easy to remember word, is Botox. And so this person was talking about somebody having too much Botox in their lips. And as the conversation went on, I was only getting snippets because I was sat having my own tea and cake and, sat with the kids and stuff. But it became very apparent that people use this, and I've come across this since as well, that people use the words Botox and filler interchangeably. And so it's my job as a practitioner to put the right information out there. And not necessarily to make sure everybody knows every detail about what treatments are and things like that. That's, not what you can, like say that, I could go and spend a day in a car garage and still not understand what all of the different bits did, and why would I? Because it's not my job. But what is really, really important is making sure that when somebody comes into me and asks for a certain thing, they might be asking for that thing because it's the word that they recognise and it's the thing that they think they need. But the crucial part of my job is assessment and ethical treatment. So one of the classics actually is somebody who does know the difference between Botox and filler. And I'm actually going to talk about the difference between Botox and filler in a minute. But one of the classic things that I get quite a lot is people coming in and going, oh, I'm getting really deep lines here and it's making me feel, oh, can you put some filler in? Now, the answer to that isn't necessarily no, but more often than not, that's not where the filler needs to go. And they're asking for it because they're looking at a thing and they want me to treat the thing. But the key part for me is understanding why that part of their anatomy is causing them concern. More often than not, as we age, we lose volume in the mid-face. We actually gain a little bit of volume here. Gravity takes effect. We lose the strength of the ligaments that hold our fat pads in place. Our face is made up of pads of fat that are held on with ligaments. Those ligaments get slack and can't support the face, so we end up with jowls, and a whole raft of things is going on in the skin and deep musculature and the fat pads and things like that that causes this kind of slide down. And one of the key ways that sort of manifests itself and shows itself are these deep lines here. Because if I go like that, it's hard to show on camera, if I make myself look really attractive and do that, these lines are become quite deep. But if we just look at the symptom, the thing that's bothering the person, and I injected loads of filler into here to make this look smoother, what can happen is you can end up with like I call it the Homer Simpson look, this kind of big forward pointing pouty face that just is too much because we've treated a symptom, not a cause. 9 times out of 10, I will start fillers, and I will use fillers for this because they're brilliant for it. I will start with fillers here and deep in there. So if you can see, I don't know how well you can see this from here, but you can see probably a dark shadow triangle here and here. Now this is an area I want treating actually, and obviously I don't do my own. So Michelle, I'm coming for you. So by putting deep filler in here and a bit of filler into here to replace the fat pad that starts to shrink and drop, you're effectively putting the coat hangers back in. So you put some structure back in. It supports the under eye area. It gives you a better side profile. And what it does is it lifts. So if I do, on which side is it? I'm doing it back to front. So if I sort of replicate what happens when you put a bit of filler in, if you look at how deep this line on me is, and I go like that, can you see that line almost disappears? So what's happening is you put a bit of filler there, it creates structure, replaces the coat hangers, puts a bit of scaffolding back. You can put some in here if it's needed. You can look at jawline and things as well. And this is all about putting structure back. See, I didn't have to do very much to make myself look a lot younger. And you can do that with fillers. If you just go for the bit they've asked for, if you know, you just focus on the thing that concerns them, then sometimes it can look a bit odd, a bit abnormal. It doesn't address the reasons the face is aging. And so it's about getting the client to understand why you're suggesting something rather than going for the thing that bothers them. Now, you can still then put fillers here. What I tend to do is do this in stages. Rather than bring someone in and do 3, 4, 5 syringes of filler all in one go, I'll do between 1 and 3, bring them back a couple of weeks later, see how the face has settled, and then very possibly put some here, but I tend to use a lot less than I would otherwise have done. So it's about assessing the face, understanding the anatomy, understanding the aging process. I don't paint by numbers. I don't measure, well, I do measure people to some degree because you have to understand where facial arteries are and things like that. So I do draw lines on people based on their anatomy, but I tend to look artistically. So I tend to look at the person and think, okay, well, if I follow these numbers, then I'm going to put filler here, 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 and here. But as long as you understand the anatomy and it's safe to do that, it's actually better to look at the person's structure. I've got one client who's quite asymmetrical. She needs a lot more on one side than she does the other. So it's about making sure the paint by numbers is important from an anatomical point of view and a safety point of view, but actually you need to understand that individual person's anatomy to make the right suggestions for what they need where. And obviously this comes alongside the right advice on skincare and slowing aging and all of that kind of thing. It's actually really, really important. So that's my take on how important it is for people to understand exactly what it is they're asking for. And if they're not asking for the right thing, making the right recommendations so they do understand why you're making those recommendations. I hope that makes sense. So moving on from the sort of ethical side and talking about the difference between, people understanding what is Botox, what is filler. What is the difference between Botox and filler? I think more people understand that, but that's possibly because I come across a lot more people, and the people I speak to quite often do now understand that. But there's a huge amount of people out there who don't. And that's fine. Like I said, I don't know what the different parts of a car are. It's not my job to. I know a few bits, but I wouldn't be able to look into an engine and tell you exactly what everything is. Or if I knew what the name of a thing was, I wouldn't necessarily know how it worked. So Botox and filler. Okay, we've talked a bit about filler, so I'll start with that one first. Filler is a physical substance that you can see. It's like a gel. If I ever get an out-of-date syringe or I have some left after treatment, I will show you. I'll come and do a little video so you can see what the texture of that is. It's a very soft, pliable gel. There are different strengths or thicknesses of that. There's very, very soft ones all the way up to quite firm ones. And it is used to replace lost volume or to add volume where you need some. So, for example, I'm not one for big duck lips and that kind of thing, but I will do sort of volume into lips if they're very thin. As we age, we lose lips. My lips need doing again. I looked the other day, and if I turn sideways, I haven't got much for top lip now. So again, Michelle, I'm coming for you. So you want a slightly firmer one to give some volume and shape. And I want very firm ones to put this back. So when we talked about putting this volume back, you want a bit scaffolding, you want some strength there. And it is a very physical product. You want it to stay where you put it. And for things like these lines and these lines around here, so when you get your downturns and your what we call the marionettes, unfortunately I don't have those, but some people do. When you get these, you want a much softer and more pliable filler that isn't going to feel lumpy, isn't going to look odd, and is going to kind of blend in with your own skin and tissue itself. Very soft ones, you can go all the way down to the very, very softest ones, which can go just under the skin, and they can be used for sort of hydrating an area when we get what we call smokers lines, whether you've smoked or not. This is an area that is quite good for the very, very soft fillers. So there's lots of different types that are used in different ways around the face, but they are all, generally speaking, or the most common types. There are other types as well, but the most common types and the ones that most aesthetics practitioners will use are temporary. So they are dissolvable and the body will break them down. And they are made of a substance called hyaluronic acid. We have that in our skin. It is a substance that is designed to hang on to water, so it's very hydrating. It allows plumping, so you get a lot of swelling in the lips, for example, when you first do lips, because it attracts loads of water to itself alongside the physical trauma of having needles put in your lips, and then that settles down a bit, but it does help hang on to water in the skin. So like I said about sort of soft fillers around the mouth, it helps hydrate and plump. You can get versions of hyaluronic acid in serums that are applied topically, for serums that are needled into the skin, and we produce it naturally in our skins as well. So it's a really important ingredient, and there's different ways of combining and cross-linking hyaluronic acid to do the things that we want to do, to make them into fillers or serums or whatever it is that we're planning on doing with them. So that's fillers, and they can be used in a whole variety of ways, from, like I said, replacing lost volume as we age, all the way through to sort of helping skin condition and those kind of things. So that fillers are a fantastic product, and I think part of the problem is the media has they kind of, you know, they've demonized them. You know, we look back as far as sort of Leslie Ash drama, where the poor woman had the most horrendous fillers done, and they were, my understanding is, they were silicone based permanent fillers. They were very badly done, and she had a horrible reaction to them, and it ruined her career. The fillers now are far safer. It's very unlikely anybody would have an allergic reaction to them, and they are dissolvable. So if somebody has a problem, if we get sort of, you know, God forbid, but occasionally happens, a blockage of a blood vessel, they can be dissolved fairly easily and fairly quickly. So fillers are fantastic, and they are, if used properly, nobody should know that you've got them. You know, I think the problem is, if you can see somebody's had fillers, there's either too much in there or they've been badly done. And in my mind, if there's too much in there, they have been badly done. But that's my opinion. Some people love the big lip look, the big cheek look. I think that's a fashion that's passing. And sort of on the ethical side, I don't tend to treat to fashion. I tend to treat to the person's face, the person's anatomy. I make sure treatments are age appropriate as well. I don't do Russian lips, for example. I don't do lemon bottle. And so the trends I tend not to follow, because these treatments, although they're kind of temporary, they can affect people longer term, and I don't want to go down that route. So age appropriate, anatomy appropriate, as far as I'm concerned, is the way to treat. So yeah, back to my point, that if fillers are very visible and very obvious, to me they're badly done. But as I said, there are people who would disagree with that, and that's absolutely their place to, you know, some people like the more done look, some people like to be seen that they've got fillers in their face. If that's the look you want, I'm not the practitioner for you, and I'm okay with that. I'm also very okay with the fact that not everybody is going to like my approach, and not everybody's going to like me personally, and do you know what, that's okay too. Be comfortable with the practitioner that you choose, and if I'm not that person, then find somebody you are comfortable with. I could even recommend somebody for you. You know, I'm not precious. I'm old enough to deal with the fact that I'm not going to like everybody, and not everybody is going to like me, and not everybody's going to like the way I practice, and that is absolutely fine. I love my clients. I have a good relationship with pretty much all of them, and I would like that to continue, and you should want that as well. If you're not comfortable with your practitioner, choose somebody else. If that's me, that's fine. If it, you know, if you're not comfortable with your practitioner and want to have a consultation with me, that's also fine. And it's how it should be. There is room for all of us. And, you know, I'm not here to clean up and steal people's clients. You know, some people will be happier with me. Some people will be happier with someone across the road, or, you know, somewhere else in town. So that's completely fine. So we've talked about fillers. And the point of this was talking about the difference between fillers and Botox. Interestingly, 4 people dropped off when I said, if you don't like me, go somewhere else. And they've gone. I don't know whether to take that personally or not. So difference between Botox and fillers. Okay, so fillers we've talked about. They're a physical substance for replacing volume, hydrating the skin, creating shape, structure, scaffolding, reducing sort of the aging face. Botox is a completely different thing. It's not the same thing as fillers at all. Botox is a toxin. Botulinum toxin A is what we use. It was, if you're old enough, you will remember it being a biological warfare agent. It's a very, very nasty biological warfare agent. But actually, as far as aesthetics goes, it was most recently used, most originally used in ophthalmology. It can correct squints. It can be used in neonates, in babies, in SCBU, things like that, for various things. It's a very powerful but very useful and versatile drug. It is a prescription only medicine. It's used in very, very tiny amounts. If you get a bottle of Botox and look into it, you can barely see anything. It's used in absolutely minute amounts. And it is used to stop the connection between the brain and a muscle. So that's how it's used in squints, because it stops an overactive muscle pulling the eye in. And in the case of aesthetics, it is used to stop the brain making those muscles do that, those muscles do that, and these muscles do this. There's various places you can use it. And it temporarily stops the brain being able to talk to those muscles. It is a prescription only medicine, so it's very, very important that whoever gives it, if they're not a medic themselves, they have to see, or if they're a medic but not a prescriber, they have to see a prescriber to be able to have that Botox injected, because it has to be written as a formal prescription for that person. So that Botox has to have their name on it, is for them. So that is used, it's temporary. So where fillers can last, lip fillers usually top them up sort of 6 monthly. Facial fillers, deeper, thicker fillers, we're looking at 12 to 18 months, something like that. Some can even last a little bit longer. I had some great cheek fillers that are starting to need replacing, but they were over 2 years ago, so I've had a really good run with that. And if anybody from the company is watching, they were Kai Sense, which was really fab. But Botox tends to last around 12 to 14 weeks. And what happens is it's injected into muscles, so whichever muscles you're trying to stop the brain communicating with, it's injected into those. And what happens over the course of a few days up to a couple of weeks is it paralyzes. Basically, if you imagine, say that's your muscle, that's your nerve fiber connecting to the brain. This is your nerve fibers talking to the muscle. These move, the muscle moves, and you need to stop that muscle being able to communicate, those nerves being able to communicate with that muscle. And then over time, the brain goes, hang on a minute, I used to be able to use these nerves to talk to this muscle. And it realizes it can't. And then very slowly over the course of a few weeks, you get to about 4 to 6 weeks, and the brain starts going, hang on a minute, I know I really, really do want to move that muscle. And so probably from about the midway point, the brain starts to very, very slowly regrow these little muscle fibers to reconnect that communication with the muscle. And so you get a sort of fairly quick increase in the paralysis of that muscle. That muscle can't move because there's nothing telling it to move. And so you get this nice smooth look, no frowns, no forehead lines, no crow's feet. And that happens fairly quickly. I've got some clients that kick in literally in a couple of days, and others that can still be changing and still reacting at the sort of 2 to 3 week point. So what I tend to do is review around the 2 week point, and you can adjust. Not everybody needs a top up. It used to be called a top up. I don't call it a top up. I call it a review and adjustment as necessary. And then around the 4 to 6 week point, it tends to be the most natural result. You've got a nice smooth finish. You've got but you're starting to get just a tiny bit of movement. It's softened a little bit. There shouldn't, it's rare that I completely freeze anybody and there's nothing at all and you've got the startled rabbit in headlights look. I try not to do that. But you get that first 6 weeks and then it starts to soften. And over the next 6 weeks, it very gradually wears off. And so you then repeat the 12 to 14 weeks. Ideally, particularly if you've not had it before, I would be recommending regularly doing it 12 to 14 weeks. Because if you don't, those muscles start to get really strong again. You want to, I'd say to people, you want to keep those out of the gym. Because if you went to the gym and you got quite fit and then you stopped going for a while, if you only stopped going for a week or two and then started again, you wouldn't have lost much of that strength. But if you stopped going to the gym for 6 months, 12 months, it would take a lot more to get back the strength that you had. So when we start, these muscles can be quite strong. So if you then make sure they can't move regularly for the first 12 to 18 months, they lose a lot of their strength. And in some cases, not everybody, but in some cases, you can then start to reduce how frequently Botox is given. Excuse me 1 second. I've been cuddling my cup of tea and it's going cold and I really needed a drink. So, so I tend to recommend that over the first year or two, you do have it regularly to slow down that really strong movement and hopefully then start to drop off as you go. So hopefully that's given you an idea of the difference between Botox and fillers and how different they are as substances. They can be used brilliantly together for amazing anti-aging and volume replacement and sort of smoothing creases and things like that. And I always recommend that if you're going to invest in things like injectables, you also make sure you're doing the right things to support your skin at the same time. Because if you're just doing injectables, you're not addressing the outside bit. You're not addressing sun damage. You're not addressing hydration, the sort of flexibility of your skin. And if you do the right things alongside your injectables, you get a much, much better longer term result. You can address the sort of long-term aging that you get if you don't, well, you get it anyway, and I can't stop you aging, but I can reel it in a little bit. We can slow it down. My goal is to make you look really, really good for your age. I don't want to try and take 20 years off you. It's when you start trying to do things like that that aesthetics looks odd. And it's those kind of things that give aesthetics a bad name. I'm sure we can all think of celebrities who have gone down that route, had very severe facelifts or massive amounts of filler. I think that's my cue to finish. We've just got to, my children have just arrived back from school. So I was kind of there anyway, to be fair. So my view is, I won't be, my goal is to keep it natural, keep it age appropriate, and look at the structure of your skin, the aging aspects of your skin, and make appropriate recommendations based on what you want to achieve, what the things that bother you, and your budget and your diary. There's loads of aspects to take into account. So I hope that's been useful. I hope it's just built on what we were talking about yesterday about the ethics of what I do and why those things are so important, and the differences between different types of injectables. So have a great evening. Any questions, give me a shout, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye.